All right, thank you so very much indeed, and thanks for joining us. It's the Lagos Center on Kakaaki, the African Voice. Of course, Salama, to your right, women are going through a lot in Nigeria, not just in Nigeria, even elsewhere outside the country. So today we'll be looking at some issues and why this has been happening, particularly when it comes to domestic violence. Now, domestic violence is a social problem in many parts of Africa, and this may not be unconnected with a deep cultural belief in some quarters that is socially acceptable to hit a woman to discipline a spouse. And you'll be wondering what sort of discipline is that if you have to hit a woman to get her disciplined. And indeed, domestic violence is widespread and shows no signs of lessening in Nigeria. According to statistics released by a non-governmental organization, Clean Foundation, which is formerly known as Culture for Law Enforcement Education in Nigeria, 1 in every 3 respondents in that particular survey admitted to being victims of domestic violence. And the survey also found a nationwide increase in domestic violence in the past 3 years, from 21% in 2011 to 30% in 2013. Domestic violence in Nigeria is usually targeted against women, and this comes in various forms ranging from rape, acid attacks, molestation, wife battering, and corporal punishment, among others. So we'll be looking at all of these issues and how this can be addressed. I have joining me on Kakaaki Studio this beautiful Monday morning, which is the beginning of the week, Dr. Ama Onyerinma. Dr. Ama Onyerinma is the founder and also the executive director of Live Abundantly Empowerment Initiative. Of course, the doctor will be telling us so many things about the need to stem the rising trend in domestic violence in Nigeria. She will also try to profile some solutions as to how Nigerian women can get out of this problem. That's possible ways to empower women to make them live up to expectation and be nation builders in the country where they are. Play that role effectively. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
All right, doctor. Now, first of all, yesterday Sunday was Mother's Sunday in Nigeria, and if you watch the television or if you went to some churches in Nigeria, you'll find women, dressed in their different uniforms. We're being celebrated. You even hear clergymen, talking about women and why they need to be celebrated. You're a woman, and I know you'll be biased in this, but do you think women really need to be celebrated?
Well, first of all, Happy Mother's Day to you. And women do need to be celebrated every single day, not just on Mother's Day. We're the nurturers, we're the ones who birth the children, we raise them. We do so much for the country as women, politically, socially. Be it biased, we're still a part of this society. So yes, we should be celebrated. And, there is also Father's Day that will come along in a few months. So they will have their chance to celebrate.
So men should also be celebrated. Because many people will say it's actually a God-given role, to nurture children, to stay at home and take care of the children, even though that doesn't happen anymore as much these days. So is there anything special that would make a woman be celebrated? That's what many men will be asking.
Well, both parents are responsible for nurturing their children and raising their children, but much of it falls on the woman, just by fact of her biological makeup, and she's the one who births the child and becomes emotionally attached during the process of pregnancy and all of that. So it does fall on women much more than men. So yes, it should be celebrated.
All right, and that's happening already. So let's look at the issue of domestic violence, which is one issue, that has would I say is really a global issue. Yes, that even the UN is very, very key, in seeing how it can be tackled. Yes. What exactly do you think leads to domestic violence, especially when it comes to women? I know some men are also, violently abused in their homes, yes, domestically, but more women are involved, really.
Yes, as your study showed, 1 in 3 women in Nigeria are violated, either by an intimate partner violence or somebody else from the outside that they don't know. The reality is violence has always occurred. It's been part of society for as long as we know it. But there's a rise in the reporting, which means that more information is available. At the same time, more women are becoming more empowered in knowing what their rights are. The United Nations Human Rights Declaration says that women should, nobody has the right to be violated. Freedom from torture and denigrating behavior. So that's all under domestic violence, to be honest. So there is a rise in it, And part of that is due to the fact that more of it is being reported, but on the other hand, not enough is being done. So it is important for women to understand their rights. It's important for women to understand that once they're violated, it can be repeated by their spouses or their domestic partners. And so they have to take a stand for themselves and for their children. Because again, there's a cycle of violence that continues. So if a child witnesses violence, not knowing any better, they can go on and replicate that in their own homes. So it's time for us to take a stand against violence. It will also help if the government will pass some of the gender equity laws, which could have addressed violence. Don't get me wrong, we do have a law in Nigeria against domestic violence, which was passed in 2013, but it hasn't been adopted by all states. Just a few states have. Lagos State, for one, is very much into eliminating domestic violence, and we have a police force that has a gender unit that women can report to when they're being violated, so that they can be supported through advocacy, they can be supported through psychological support. But it's important for us to know more about this and to address it.
Now, many people are getting more empowered to know their rights, you said, but then even this issue of gender equality also breeds violence in some homes. I've heard a couple of women talking about, how they want to maintain their rights in their homes, try to say, we have equal rights, every responsibility has to be shared. And this has led to violence, because some men, either due to cultural belief or religious belief as well, do not believe that a woman should be equal to a man. So how should women go about this gender equality thing to avoid this leading to violence?
Well, first of all, let's define the word gender. Gender is beyond your biological assignment, right? Gender also involves the social, political, and economic context in which the society in which you live in. So your role as a woman within the society is determined by the social, political, economic context. Make sense?
Yes.
So that's the first thing. Now, when you turn to equality, you're talking about equal rights to education, equal rights to express yourself, equal rights to be able to be part of the political, economic, social system. But that right is also, as much as it's given to you as a human being and as part of the community and the country, it's also defined by the culture and also by religion. So unfortunately, in Nigeria, where religion plays a huge role, it gets to a point where women who want and understand their rights can't really exercise it because of the cultural and religious biases.
And then how do women, go about this? Because that's where the issue lies. Now, you've tried to explain what gender equality is all about, but some women, don't quite understand it that way. They just believe that, okay, gender equality, that means you can really tell me to sit there and I sit. You can tell me to stand there and I stand. And every man believes, in the home, he's the leader of the home, he's the captain of the ship, and then you just obey. Submissiveness, that's exactly the way they put it. So how should women go about it to ensure that their rights are maintained, but at the same time they also know that in the home there must be a king?
I don't know about having a king in the home. That's a little bit
too much.
But when you get into a marriage, it's a partnership. Marriage is a partnership between two people. Yes, some people have marriage based on religion, some have it based on cultural laws, some have it just based on the laws of the country. But marriage is a partnership. It's not servitude. It's not a role of servitude that women are playing in marriage. So let's start with the gender equality bill that wasn't passed last year. That bill would have helped tremendously to address the issues of domestic violence. That bill would have stop the discrimination of women in terms of access to employment, in terms of rights to owning property, in terms of access to education. So we live in a country where half the population is treated as a second-class citizen, meaning women. And we're dealing with male privilege, so to speak. And the reason the bill wasn't passed is because, as you said, the men felt that religion does not allow me to give you that right. But we do have the right as human beings to equal access to education, to employment, to property. But we don't have that coming up in Nigeria right now. So more has to be done from the governmental level as well as advocacy like agencies like ours.
Okay, we'll come to what can be done, but let's just look at one of the causes of domestic violence, really, because if you read some statistics, you hear that, when women are not empowered, in homes, when they are not able to contribute, anything to the upkeep of the family, the man believes he works so hard to get everything, to provide everything for you, so you just have to be there and listen to me. That's one issue. Then on the other hand, women that are also empowered, and at the point that they get, maybe they are more financially buoyant than the men, that creates another kind of violence in the homes again. So looking at this, what do you think women, how do you think women can actually be empowered to ensure that they are not vulnerable to, all kinds of violence domestically?
Well, vulnerability is the key word that you used here. Vulnerability is the way you feel in a situation, right? If you don't feel vulnerable in a situation, then you are empowered and you know your rights and you can speak up. The other thing is women need to be more vocal. We need to talk about these issues. We don't talk about domestic violence that occurs in our homes because historically we're told not to discuss these things. It's a family matter. And so we sort of put it underneath and we continue to live in that situation. The reality is, as I said earlier on, if you've been beaten once, if you've been raped, if you've been attacked, even within your own home, it is going to be repeated to the point where you can be murdered. So you do need to speak up. You do need to take action. You need to address these issues. Even as an educated, empowered woman, there is no shame in telling the truth. The shame is in not speaking the truth. The truth is, we live in a society where women are treated as second-class citizens. We live in a society where there isn't a gender equality and equity bill. We live in a society where 74% of the women are illiterate, as opposed to 43% of the men. There is a bias against women, and women and men should support us in addressing this bias. Otherwise, it will continue for generations. Nigeria has been independent for 57 years this year, and we're still dealing with the issue of access to education for women or for girls. And if women can have the resources they need for them to be part of nation building, that shouldn't be the discussion we're having now. Because if you go back to prehistorical time, women participated in government. They were involved in administration. They were involved in the community. They were mediators. And all of that changed with the advent of colonialism. The wonderful missionaries and colonials came here to give us civilization. And with that came education. But education was biased. When they left, they gave more credence to the men getting education. Being educated gives you more latitude to access the political, the social, the economic structure of a society. We have a disparity.
Now, you don't think that is happening already, because I know, unlike before, so many women are getting involved in politics at the moment. So many people are speaking up. And by the way, if you say people who are violated once should speak out, should talk about it. For many who are watching you and who are in this category of women who are being battered on a daily basis, where and who should they be speaking to? Where exactly do they get help?
The first thing that you do is go to the police. The police have a gender unit. You report it to the police. And if you have been raped, they have a center that you can go to where the test will be done, the rape kit will be performed, and you can state, the nature of the incidents. And the perpetrators can be prosecuted. There are laws against it. There is punishment, right? So the first thing is to report it. The second thing is to seek psychological support. If you need therapy, to get that therapy. And then, of course, you have to remind yourself that you are not at fault. It is not your fault that you're being violated. It's the perpetrator's fault. But you have to speak up and you have to take action. And it's even more important that you do that for the sake of the girls that you're raising, if you have girls in your family. Because if you don't do that, they go into marriage believing that that is appropriate behavior. It is not. No one has the right to violate you. None at all. And we do have a law in this country that was passed in 2013 that protects women against domestic violence.
Now, I do know I've spoken with some men who say, before a man can beat a woman, the woman somehow may have even contributed to that battering, because some women, even though they are not physically strong, but when it comes to their mouth or their tongue, they are quite strong. They can tell you the history of your life, and that would actually propel you into hitting her, even when you don't intend to. So what would be your advice to women also when dealing with their spouses at home? Is there any particular way you have to deal with a man to ensure that even if he is angry over anything you have done, he doesn't really have to hit you because of the way you have talked to him?
So you raised 2 points here. One is it could be the woman's fault. It's never the woman's fault.
A woman never contributes to being battered or being beaten. That's what you're saying. And in some homes, women are the ones that are actually beating men.
Well, it is true. But whether it's a man beating a woman or a woman beating a man, it is still violence, and it's not acceptable. You're partners in a marriage, right? You came into this union to be together, to have a life together, to procreate, and there is no reason for you to lose your control and hit another person. It's not their fault. It's you dealing with anger management. So go for therapy or take an anger management course. But you don't have a right to hit your wife. Neither does a wife have the right to hit the husband.
We go for anger therapy. That's another
anger
one.
Therapy. Go for anger management. Go out for a walk. Do anything to calm down. But you don't have the right to hit anybody.
Okay, now let's come to where you actually belong, and Live Abundantly Empowerment Initiative. What is this all about, and how do you think women can be, empowered to ensure that, they live up to expectation as nation builders, you call them?
Well, Live Abundantly Empowerment came about basically around the ideas that you and I have discussed today. So we have 3 focus areas. The first one is violence against women and children, which we didn't talk about the children, we're just talking about the women today. Okay. But there is violence against women and children.
Maybe we should look at that too. Some of the issues.
The second issue is we want to address the marginalization of children due to poverty and physiological differences. And thirdly, we are interested in empowering women. We believe that women can be nation builders, but for them to do that, they must have equal access to education, equal access to the conditions that allow them to participate. You raised a question earlier that women are involved in politics, but do you know that the ratio of women involved in politics, the percentage, as you even say, is 7% in Nigeria, as opposed to 44% in South Africa, or 20% in the Cameroons, or 34% in Uganda? Why is it that Nigeria, the most populous, and sometimes people say the most advanced in Africa, has such a small amount of women that are represented? Why is it that when a gender bill is being passed in the Senate, it gets defeated? 109 senators, and only 7 are women, and 102 are men. Of course the bill isn't going to be passed. We're talking about male privilege here. And the culture and society do not help women, because much of it is given to, the credence is given to the male as being superior and more viral and more competitive. So we need to change how we access education for women. Women need education. There is no reason why of the 40, or let's say 50% of the country is women, right? 74% of that is illiterate. How can they access the resources? How can they get loans? How can they go to work? How can they do anything that meaningfully contributes to the development of this country? It's very important that we educate women. It's very important that we empower them. If you don't have formal education, we can help you with informal education, vocational studies, literacy. Once you know how to read and write, you can make some progress, right? But if you don't, you can't. You're left to be a peasant, to be a farmer. There's nothing wrong in being a farmer. As a matter of fact, everybody's rushing back into farming. But how do you get the loans? How do you own the land so that you can be responsible for your own economic independence? Very vital.
So let's look at how or what role you think the authorities can do about this, can play about this, because as for many women who may want to go to school, for instance, maybe probably because of their, financial incapabilities, if the families are not able to train even the girl child and all that. Is there anything the government should be doing about this?
Well, let's say this. Education is free and everyone should have access to education.
Is it free in Nigeria?
Well, public school education. Yeah, grammar school, comprehensives, they're free. You're not paying money for those, as opposed to if you go to a private school. But the access for girl children is still limited. In some parts of the country, 2/3 of the girls are not educated. They have no formal education. So the first thing is making sure that all girls do go to school. If you're going to create equity and equality, then everyone needs to have the basic education. Education is key here. And education also requires that as they move up in the level, secondary school, university, perhaps it's important for us to have affirmative action where there is more equal representation of boys and girls throughout university. It's important because there's an imbalance right now. And that imbalance is what you see when you look at the government representation of women in politics. It's what you see when you go into offices. It really is showing us as Nigerians what is going on. Then we also need to make sure that they know their rights. You need to know your rights. If you don't know your rights, you can't really access what is available to you. So we need to educate the children, both boys and girls. But now there needs to be an emphasis on the girls. 2, the government needs to help by allowing the laws that are necessary to protect women, girls in this country, to provide equity and equal representation in government as well as politically, economically, socially. Women can help, and it is important when 40% or 40 to 50% of your population is not having access. It's important to address that issue.
Okay, let's look at some of the issues. Yeah, now you're talking about people who do not know their rights and who have not gone to school, but we also know there are quite a number of women who have gone to school, who are educated, who know their rights, but they are quite afraid, to go into the political arena because of perceived, or we don't have enough resources to be able to do that. The men will not give us the support that we need, and a whole lot of other issues. So if the women who are elites, who are educated, are afraid to go into politics, even if you bring up others who are educated, the system will still continue like that. So is there anything that would be, that can be done to ensure that the political terrain is not, so how would I call it, so violent, if I should put it that way, so to scare women from participating actively?
Well, affirmative action. The quickest way to correct this is to allow affirmative action to come into place, where there's an equal representation of women, maybe 30% or 40% of the seats are allocated to women. They still have to go through the rigor of being elected, but a certain number of seats should be allocated to the women. Then you begin to have a balance. So the next time the gender equality bill comes up, you're going to have not 7% of the women or 2% trying to vote, and then, it's lopsided right now. There has to be a balance. There isn't a balance. So how about encouraging women to go in, but also putting affirmative action into place? Perhaps we need to reduce the amount of money that is being spent on campaigning, right? Why should we be spending millions on campaigning? Maybe there should be a cap. In the UK, there is a cap. Why not? Why not? Maybe that will help the women to gain entrance into the political sphere.
Even when there's a cap, you still see people go beyond spending beyond the cap that you have already. Okay, so let's look at some other issues of empowering women. Yes. Really, you talked about education, and is that all there is to empowering a woman? For those, you said vocational studies, quite yes. right. But are there other things that NGOs like you can do to ensure that women are actually empowered to
yes, indeed.
know their right?
Yes. Women need to take advantage of government funds that are available for startup companies, startup organizations, for agriculture, for traders, market women. The Lagos State Employment Trust Fund does offer loans to women. Actually, it's to everybody, but it's there. It's there for the women to access. So you go through a training course and then you can access the loan. The loan starts at 250,000 naira. That's something that can help. But at the same time, we also need to make sure that women have the land that they need, because there's some who want to go into farming. Women need to have the technology. Women need to have the computer skills. So education is not just formal education. I'm talking about formal and informal education. It's very key right now in order to make the change in society.
Now in Lagos, I'm aware there's a women development center where you have so many vocational, education that is being offered to women, but not very many women are even aware of the existence of this, even at no cost at all.
Yes.
Now, so now some viewers are looking at you, so women who actually want to be empowered, but they don't exactly know where to go to. Is there any way they can contact you, or anybody you think that can help really to show them exactly how to do and what to go about, how to go about?
Yes. So one of the things that we're currently working on is offering some courses, short courses, 4 to 6 week courses, and then upon completion of these courses, they will be guaranteed a business loan, and that business loan they can use to start, whether it's, I'm trying to think of something that they can do right now and it's failing me. Driving, plumbing, makeup artists, secretarial work, receptionists, those kinds of things. So there are things that we're working on right now that we hope will be able to help women make that slight change in their economic viability.
All right, we must thank you very much for making our time to be with us on today's edition of the program. But is there any advice you would like to give to the men out there also who would want to support women in what specific ways they can do that?
The most important thing for us to understand in Nigeria is all of us are responsible for developing this nation, men and women. And in order for that to occur, women must be given equal access to the labor market. Women must be given equal access to the political sphere. Women must be given equal access to education. And we have to protect them. Security is our human right. Yes, education is our right. So it's important for us to put all of those things together. It doesn't affect our cultural beliefs or our religious beliefs, that other countries who are just as developed as we are, if not more so, and they can still exist and still have the cultural beliefs and the religious beliefs. But we're talking about building a nation. To build a nation, all of us need to be involved, both men and women.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
To build a nation, everyone should be involved, both men and women. Those are the last words from my guest this morning on Kakaaki, the African Voice, talking about how to empower women to become nation builders, which role they must become if Nigeria must be a better place for all to live in. That's what you're saying, isn't it?
That is what I'm saying.
All right, thank you so much. Dr. Onyerinma has been my guest. She's the founder and the executive director, Live Abundantly Empowerment Initiative, trying to empower women to know their rights, get education, and get politically, socially, and economically involved in developing Nigeria. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
All right. It's not over yet. I'll be linking you back with Abuja for more on Kakaaki, the African Voice. Please don't go anywhere. My name is Nkoli Omodu. Do have a pleasant Monday.